They say evolution doesn't shape living things, it transforms our machines too. Motorcycles are no exception. Today we're looking at 15 notoriously dangerous features found on old bikes that thankfully vanished as safety and technology caught up with our need for speed. Number 15. Rigid frames. Back in the early days of motorcycling, bikes didn't always have the luxurious shock-absorbing suspensions that we take for granted now. Some machines rolled out of factories with rigid frames, meaning no rear suspension at all. Every joint, pothole, and bump in the road was transferred directly to the rider's spine. That might not sound too terrible at a gentle cruising speed on a perfectly smooth roadway, but remember, these were often primitive roads, dirt, gravel, or cobblestone, sorely lacking the neat asphalt highways that we have today. Without rear shock absorbers, the rider not only endured a punishing, uncomfortable journey, but also had less control over the machine. Hitting a large bump could jar the entire bike, making it more difficult to maintain steering input. A rider could lose traction or stability in an instant, especially at higher speeds. As technology improved, manufacturers realized that smoothing out the ride was crucial for both comfort and safety. Proper suspension systems soon emerged, dramatically reducing rider fatigue and making motorcycles far more predictable. Today's multi-adjustable shocks, advanced damping, and carefully tuned frames have all but erased the bone-rattling days of rigid frames. Ensuring safer, saner journeys for everyone on two wheels. Number 14. Early drum brakes with no backup. Before the era of hydraulic disc brakes that bite down with surety, early motorcycles relied on drum brakes that were, quite frankly, hit or miss when it came to effective stopping power. With modest frictional material pressed against the inner surface of a metal drum, these setups often faded quickly under heavy use. On a long downhill stretch, riders might squeeze the lever only to find an alarmingly vague response as the shoes overheated and braking power waned. As if it weren't nerve-wracking enough, many early bikes had only a rear drum brake. Some even lacked a front brake entirely, leaving riders with a single, easily compromised point of deceleration. Imagine barreling down a hill, fully aware that your braking ability is diminishing by the second, hoping you won't need an emergency stop because you simply might not have one. Over time, manufacturers introduced better friction materials, cooling fins, and eventually the front brake itself. The ultimate solution emerged in the form of hydraulic disc brakes, which greatly improved braking consistency and power. By banishing the old single-drum arrangements, modern motorcycles can stop on a dime, giving riders far greater control and drastically reducing the danger factor of simply slowing down. Number 13. Hand shifters and foot clutches. In the early and mid-20th century, some motorcycles demanded a balancing act that would make a circus performer nervous. Instead of the now standard left-hand clutch lever and left foot shift lever arrangements, these bikes featured a hand shifter mounted on the side of the gas tank and a foot pedal acting as the clutch. Changing gears required you to remove one hand from the handlebars, feel for the shifter, and somehow keep the bike steady. This arrangement was especially treacherous in heavy traffic or on twisty roads. You had to manage throttle, balance, and steering, all while fumbling with a tank-mounted lever to swap cogs. An unexpected bump or swerve could quickly send the whole operation sideways, literally. To make matters worse, a poorly timed shift in a turn could unsettle the bike, increasing your chances of a crash. The move to standardized controls, with handlebar levers and foot shifters, was a godsend. Now riders can focus on the road rather than juggling appendages just to get into the next gear. Good riddance to those nerve-wracking hand-shifting days, which reminded us that safer controls mean safer rides for everyone involved. Number 12. Exposed primary drives and chains. In the era before careful shielding and closed covers, many motorcycles left their primary drives, chains, and belts exposed to the elements and to the rider's limbs. Picture a spinning chain or belt just inches from your pant leg. A moment's inattention, a loose piece of clothing, or a curious finger could lead to a gruesome outcome. Without guards or housings, these mechanical parts posed a genuine threat every time you swung a leg over the seat. Road debris or pebbles could also jam into the chain's moving parts, potentially causing a catastrophic lockup. The chain itself, poorly lubricated and prone to stretching, might snap under stress, turning it into a whip-like missile. Even maintaining these systems was risky business, as cleaning and adjusting involved working around hazardous moving components. As engineering improved, manufacturers enclosed chains or switched to safer belt drives and shafts, often installing sturdy covers and guards to keep both the rider and the mechanism safe. Today's well-protected drivetrains mean fewer freak accidents and injuries. While the idea of raw mechanical exposure might appeal to hardcore purists, most riders would agree that a safer, guarded primary drive is a welcome evolution in motorcycle design and personal well-being. Number 11. Acetylene headlamps. Before the advent of reliable electrical headlights, some early motorcycles featured acetylene lamps, powered by a chemical reaction of carbide and water. It was roughly the equivalent of strapping a candle to your bike and hoping it wouldn't blow out. On a moonless night, these lamps provided faint, yellowish illumination that barely reached beyond the front wheel. Misty conditions or rain? Forget about it. You might as well be riding blindfolded. To make matters worse, these lamps were finicky. Riders had to light them, ensuring proper gas flow. Any mishandling could result in a sudden flare-up or, in rare cases, an explosion. Imagine the panic if the light failed midway during a dark country road, leaving you hurtling through the blackness at unsafe speeds with no backup. As technology advanced, electric headlights powered by generators and later alternators and batteries became the norm. These lights shone brighter and much more reliably, making night riding far safer. Modern LED systems are even better, cutting through the dark and alerting other motorists to your presence. Acetylene lamps, while historically intriguing, were a faint and dangerous chapter in two-wheeled travel that no one is eager to revisit. Number 10. No front brake. Believe it or not, many early motorcycles offer no front brake at all. In some cases, riders had only the rear drum or even a simple spoon brake rubbing against the tire. This was a gamble of the highest order, since the front wheel provided the majority of the bike's stopping power. Without a front brake, bringing a speeding motorcycle to a halt quickly or safely was about as easy as stopping a runaway carriage by hand. Downhill descents became a white-knuckle ordeal. Relying solely on the rear brake often led to skids, loss of control, and accidents. Even in straight-line braking, the bike's weight naturally shifts forward, making the absent front brake a glaring liability. Many riders of the day knew that they were playing with fire, but they had little choice. The introduction of reliable front brakes revolutionized safety. Instead of praying for a slow and steady stop, riders could actually modulate their speed with precision and confidence. Today, dual discs and advanced caliper systems ensure that both wheels share the load. The notion of riding without a front brake, it seems laughable now, but once it was a common and terrifying reality. Number 9. Hard rubber and clincher tires. In motorcycling's infancy, tires were more akin to carriage wheels than the advanced rubber compounds that we know today. Hard rubber tires provided minimal grip, turning even mild corners into heart-stopping affairs. Some early designs were known as clincher tires, prone to popping off the rim if not inflated just right. A tire suddenly rolling off mid-ride? That's not exactly an ideal scenario when you're at speed. Add in the fact that roads were often unpaved or poorly maintained, and you had a recipe for disaster. Wet cobblestones or gravelly stretches turned these primitive tires into slip-and-slide units with no forgiveness. Riders needed nerves of steel and a keen sense of balance, knowing that the rubber offered all the traction of a hockey puck on ice. As rubber technology advanced, manufacturers introduced pneumatic tires with better compounds. Tread patterns and bead designs that stayed firmly on the rim. Modern tires are engineered with silica and advanced polymers, providing sticky grip and superb stability. So while the concept of riding on hard rubber on precarious clincher setups, it might hold a certain vintage allure, there's no denying that they were dangerous relics best left buried in the past. Number 8. Zero rider protection. Early motorcycles were pretty much motorized bicycles, offering about as much protection as a pair of flip-flops during a hailstorm. The concept of adding windshields, fairings, engine guards, or crash bars were practically non-existent. Riders faced not only the wind blasting full force at their chests, but also flying debris, insects the size of quarters, and the occasional low-hanging tree branch. At any speed above a leisurely putter, these conditions could become painful or even blinding. If a rider took a spill, the bike's metal edges and protruding components were exposed and unforgiving. There are no frames designed with breakaway parts. There were no engine cages and certainly no sliders. Collisions often resulted in severe injuries. Even a minor crash could become a life-threatening ordeal due to the lack of any protective structure to absorb impact. Today's motorcycles often feature careful design elements that at least mitigate damage. Engine guards, frame sliders, aerodynamic fairings, and windshields that reduce rider fatigue and the danger from road debris. While these aren't full-on safety cages like in cars, they mark a massive step forward in safety. Back then, riders and their machines were both utterly naked to the brutal realities of the open road. Number 7. Friction throttles. Before today's smooth, spring-loaded twist grips that return to idle when you let go, many old motorcycles used friction throttles. Adjusting your engine speed meant turning the throttle and then tightening a friction screw to hold it in place. It acted like a primitive cruise control, but with far more risk. If you suddenly had to slow down, you had to fumble with the friction setting before the throttle would respond. Imagine trying to brake in an emergency while your throttle stubbornly stays wide open. On a bumpy road, a friction throttle might slip or stick, causing unplanned speed changes at precisely the wrong moment. Additionally, these throttles offered less fine control, making smooth acceleration or delicate low-speed maneuvers more challenging. One small adjustment too far, and you'd be blasting ahead unintentionally. As engineering advanced, return spring throttles and integrated cables replaced these finicky contraptions, giving riders immediate control over acceleration and deceleration. Modern electronic throttle systems, ride-by-wire, and well-calibrated springs ensure that bikes respond predictably and instantly to rider input. The friction throttle is best remembered as a quirky, dangerous relic from a time when riders had to wrestle with their machines to maintain the simplest semblance of stability. Number 6. Wooden and steel-clad wheels. In the very earliest days of motorized two-wheelers, some bikes rolled on wooden wheels or flimsy steel rims adapted from bicycles. While this may have been fine at slow bicycle speeds, pushing these materials to motorcycle velocities turned them into a ticking time bomb. Wood would crack under stress, and steel rims with minimal structural integrity could bend or collapse unexpectedly, tossing the rider into a perilous tumble. These wheels offered little in the way of shock absorption or reliability. A hard impact could deform the rim, causing wobbles that made the steering unpredictable. Long rides over rough terrain were a nerve-wracking gamble. Would the wheel hold up, or would it fail spectacularly at the worst possible time? As motorcycle speed increased, the need for a stronger, safer wheel became clear. Eventually, stout spoke designs, better alloys, and precision engineering gave us wheels that could withstand serious punishment. Modern cast or forged aluminum and even carbon fiber wheels combine strength and lightness with built-in reliability. The days of hoping your wooden hoop wouldn't split mid-ride are gone, replaced by stable, thoroughly tested wheels that are integral to a bike's overall performance and safety. Number 5. Non-standardized control layouts. In the early development of motorcycles, manufacturers were still figuring out what went where. Clutch levers might appear on the left or the right, throttles could be thumb-operated or twist in the opposite direction, and gear shifts might be on unexpected sides. Mounting a new bike often felt like entering a puzzle room where you had to guess what lever controlled what. In a panic situation, fumbling with controls was more than just annoying, it could be deadly. Trying to stop, shift, or steer became a test of memory rather than instinct. Muscle memory is crucial for quick reactions, and early non-standardized layouts robbed riders of that advantage. Make the wrong move at the wrong time, and you risk crashing, often with no protective gear to soften the landing. Standardization gradually emerged as the industry matured, and the left-handed clutch, right-hand front brake lever, and left-foot gear shift pattern that we know today, well, that became the gold standard. With everyone playing by the same rules, riders could jump from bike to bike without relearning life-saving reflexes. The chaotic days of arbitrary layouts taught the world an invaluable lesson. Consistency saves lives. Number 4. Minimal or no suspension. It might sound redundant after rigid frames, but some early motorcycles took the idea of minimal comfort even further by offering little to no suspension at the front or rear. Without forks that compressed and shocks that absorbed impacts, the rider's body became the sole shock absorber. Every pothole felt like a punch to the gut. Every bump would rattle your teeth. And this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was downright dangerous. Maintaining control over a bike that's bucking and bouncing beneath you is incredibly difficult. The wheels could skip off the ground at high speed, reducing traction and inviting sudden, unpredictable slides. Worse, fatigue set in faster as the rider battled constant vibrations and impacts. A tired, rattled rider is more prone to making errors, turning a rough road into a potential tragedy. Over time, Springer forks, girder systems, and finally telescopic forks and modern shock absorbers became standard. By smoothing out the ride, these innovations improved handling, stability, and overall safety. Modern suspension systems even allow for adjustments, letting riders tailor their bike's feel to the road. The grim era of bone-jarring rides taught engineers that comfort isn't a luxury. It's a critical factor in keeping two wheels planted safely on the pavement. Number 3. No kill switch. Imagine a situation where your throttle's stuck open or you need to kill the engine immediately to avoid disaster, but you've got no kill switch. In the early days, shutting down an engine often meant turning off the fuel supply or fiddling with the magneto lever. Both methods took time, seconds you might not have in a crisis. Without a quick way to silence the roaring motor, riders sometimes faced runaway bikes, dragging them into danger. If the throttle jammed or if the rider became entangled, the inability to stop the engine quickly could lead to catastrophic outcomes. Even something as routine as parking became riskier, as you had to rely on more cumbersome methods just to end the ride. Today, the kill switch sits conveniently at the thumb's reach. Flick it and the engine cuts instantly, potentially preventing a serious accident. This feature has saved countless riders from mechanical misfortunes that could spiral into tragedies. The absence of a kill switch in early motorcycle design, it seems almost laughable now, but it's a stark reminder that even the most basic safety measures evolved from painful lessons learned on the open road. Number 2. Sidecars with no proper mounting. Sidecars brought a new dimension to motorcycling by adding an extra wheel, but early sidecar setups often lack proper engineering, bracing, and balanced weight distribution. Slap a poorly designed sidecar onto your bike, and you were in for a wild and unpredictable ride. The entire rig could pull violently to one side, making cornering a white-knuckle affair. On rough roads, the sidecar might bounce or wobble, threatening to flip the bike or hurl passengers out like a rag doll. These hastily mounted sidecars turned an already challenging vehicle into something more akin to a rodeo bull. Without standardized attachment points, sturdy frames, and proper suspension, sidecars introduced instability rather than convenience. Many riders found that managing a sidecar meant relearning how to steer and brake safely. Over time, manufacturers standardized sidecar attachments, ensuring the frames, struts, and wheel placement provided stability and predictable handling. Properly engineered sidecars now distribute weight evenly and maintain alignment, making them safer for passengers and pilots alike. The early days of ad hoc sidecar setups taught us that just adding an extra wheel and a box to a motorcycle can quickly transform a pleasant ride into a terrifying escapade. And number 1, freewheeling magnetos and unpredictable ignition systems. Before modern ignition coils and electronic engine management, motorcycles relied on magnetos and rudimentary ignition systems that could be fickle at best. These systems sometimes offered only limited control over spark timing, leaving the rider guessing when the engine would fire and how strongly. If the timing was off, a backfire could kick the rider's foot violently off a kickstarter or even cause a sudden lurch forward. On the move, unreliable ignition timing could mean unexpected power surges or misfires, making the bike surge ahead or sputter dangerously. In traffic, this unpredictability was perilous. Riders needed a mechanical understanding just to coax their engine into running smoothly. And even then, luck played a part. A mistimed ignition event at high speed could lead to a sudden loss of power, throwing off the bike's balance. Modern ignition systems are precise, computer-controlled, and effortless. With stable timing and smooth power delivery, riders have a far safer, more predictable experience. Reflecting on the days of freewheeling magnetos and guesswork ignition highlights just how far we've come. The modern rider can now focus on the road ahead, confident that the spark firing in the engine won't become an unwelcome surprise. These 15 dangerous motorcycle features show how far we've come in safety and design. Early riders faced hazards that would make modern bikers cringe. Without standardized controls, reliable brakes, or protective gear, each ride risked life and limb. Now today, after a century of progress and global safety standards, twisting the throttle means benefiting from lessons learned and countless innovations. Modern motorcycles aren't perfect, but compared to their old, deadly predecessors, they're engineering miracles, shaped by pioneers who wouldn't accept the status quo. Our current era of riding is safer and more predictable, a tribute to decades of perseverance. Ride safe, everyone, and remember to subscribe for more cool videos just like this.